Hi, good afternoon. This is Bob Zdenek, the Interim Executive Director of San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative. Welcome to our last session of today. We have a really good workshop on manufactured housing. And today we've covered a lot of ground. We started, I would say, more at 20,000 feet with our plenary session where we talked about the roadmap 2030 California housing roadmap, and we talked about research that UC Davis's Center for Regional Change, and then we talked about the REAP program, and then our second session was on university and community partnerships, which is really interesting. Then after lunch, we went for, I keep saying lunch, I should say afternoon, because those of us been here all day, we've been gobbling down food probably in 2 or 3 minutes, because we haven't had much of a break, but we then went to low-income housing tax credits, a great session that California Housing Partnership led. So our last session will be equally excellent, and it is on manufactured housing, another really important strategy tool for rural communities. So we're really excited. But before I turn it over to our moderator, I want to acknowledge our tech. We've had a really good tech support team going back and forth between the world of Whova and Zoom for those of us that have been on Zoom. And I want to thank Eusebio, Luisa, and Andrea from the CCRH team for providing all this tech support, and which they will continue through the rest of this workshop. So it's my pleasure to turn over the last panel, which is to preserve and protect manufactured housing, communities, and California's housing crisis. Our moderator is Danielle Mazzella, and she is the Preservation and Housing Data Manager for the California Housing Partnership. So I'll turn it over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing my screen. I hope you all could just see the first slide. As Bob just said, today we're talking about manufactured housing communities and the housing crisis. Here is a little rundown of what we're going to cover in today's session. And today we have some great speakers. Deb Linfeld from the Section Chief and Access to Opportunity Branch of HCD. We have Kim Kuntz, the Executive Director of California Center for Cooperative Development, and Alan Nazara, a Rural Development Specialist at RCAC. And I just wanted to start us off talking a little bit about the landscape of manufactured housing communities in California. As you can see, there are a large number throughout California, various concentrations, particularly in Southern California and the Inland Empire. In total, there are more than 5,300 active registered communities, and these all represent a sizable chunk of, unsubsidized affordable housing in California. And here on the left, you can see the cities with the largest number of active manufactured housing communities, with Bakersfield having 81 and the city of Escondido with 39. These communities are often an overlooked source of affordability and need to be recognized and prioritized as such to preserve them and prevent their closure. And just to give you a sense of closures across the state, I'll shift to another map, showing you again that concentrations of closures are two in Southern California and the Inland Empire, with the largest numbers of closures in Sacramento through West Sacramento. And to help sort of frame the session and give you a chance to meet our panelists, the question I would like to pose to them are, what are the challenges and barriers to preserving manufactured housing communities? Maybe we'll start with Deb.
I think it's going to be from our HCD at Housing Community Development. We have limited funding opportunities to help homeowners, to help park owners preserve that source of housing. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges and probably barriers that we see. So.
Great, thanks, Deb. Kim, you're up next. Kim, I think you're on mute.
I think we need more measures to help residents to be able to purchase their own community. Some probably regulatory things that would help them from having their community sold to investors.
Thank you. And last but not least, Alan.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks is the fact that most mobile home parks are privately owned. And even though they serve low-income residents, because they're privately owned, they don't have access to other funding sources that, say, nonprofits have. So, and a good portion of the owners see them as cash cows, and if they just collect the rents and don't do upkeep, then it's money in their pocket rather than money out of their pocket. So those are the bad owners, but good owners have difficulty finding additional funding to help preserve the affordability.
Thank you all. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deb.
Great, thank you, Danielle. So again, my name is Deb Linfeld. I am a section chief within our program design and implementation branch within the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I've been just really briefly, I've been in this role for about a year. But prior to that, I had another 7 years of experience with our codes and standards division. So the opposite end of manufactured housing that focused on the health and safety of homes. So now I work with a program that gives out money to preserve that housing. Prior, I worked in an area to ensure the health and safety of those homes. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Mobile Home Park Rehabilitation and Resident Ownership Program. That's a mouthful, so I'm going to say MPROP from here on out. We're a state agency, lots of acronyms. So you may already know, but that program is intended to finance the preservation of affordable mobile home parks by conversion to ownership or control by either resident organizations, nonprofit housing sponsors, or local public entities such as local governments. Another eligible use of the funds from that program includes the rehabilitation or relocation of a purchased park, and in some cases, even the repair of mobile homes. If you don't already know, the program is governed by both California statute as well as regulations, and that can complicate how we administer the program. I will say I have 7 different programs, funding programs in my portfolio. This is one of them. And this is probably the most complicated program and most cumbersome program right now as it stands today. You'll hear probably from some of the other panelists too that because it's so complicated, it is a barrier to effective utilization of the program. And that's something we're working on now to try and address. So currently in how the program is structured, there are options for both short-term and long-term loans to allow for the conversion or purchase of a park. Funding for these activities is provided when the department, HCD, Housing and Community Development, when we issue a notice of funding availability. I'm going to call it a NOFA, another acronym. And so when we determine we are ready to issue a NOFA, that is when potential applicants can use the program. One thing it's important to note is that this program just offers gap financing. Typically, we do not fund the full amount needed for a project. It's just a piece of the pie, basically. And the last NOFA we issued was probably about 18 months ago. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of applicants. This is definitely an underutilized program. There's a lot of reasons why we didn't have the interest at the time we would have liked to. Far more reasons than we have time to dive into today to discuss. But I know some of the other presenters will also touch on some of those reasons. So because it's been underutilized, we haven't done the best job we could do to explore all the reasons why applicants aren't using the program. And that's really important for us to know. I mean, one of the obvious things we know is that we have to have a willing seller and a willing buyer at the same time. And that can be really difficult to anticipate, even at the beginning to try and figure that out, but even later in the process. It can be hard to anticipate when we're going to have a willing seller or a willing buyer. So in spite of the difficulties with the underutilization of the program, and in an effort to mitigate the challenges the program has experienced over the years, we have been working with an external contractor for over a year now to analyze the barriers and obstacles that do contribute to the underutilization of the program, because we want to fully maximize the efficacy of the program. So part of that effort includes collecting that real-time data and information to help us understand just kind of the current culture and the circumstances. We do want to look to the past, but we don't want to focus solely there on what happened. It's that history is useful to help us understand how we got to where we are, but we don't want to unpack and dwell and live there. We want to make sure that we're looking forward to the future, how we can change and adapt as a state agency, how we can try our best to anticipate the needs of our stakeholders, either those who currently reside in mobile homes or who might in the future be residing in mobile home parks. We're all aware that mobile home parks are one of the last choices available here in California to people as a source of affordable housing, and we know we both want and need to preserve that source of housing to the greatest extent possible. So we expect to have a draft report sometime within the next 30 to 60 days that outlines those challenges, those barriers and obstacles that I referenced earlier, so that we can move forward to collectively explore that possibility of solutions, to continue to offer this program in the future, but also to grow it, to try and serve a broader population than we've ever been able to do so in the past. We do have some ideas. We have had some brainstorming sessions about what some solutions may be. Many of them will probably require long-term changes to existing laws and regulations. And because that is a difficult and complicated process, we want to be sure that we're thoughtful and intentional about any changes we propose to MPROP. Unfortunately, today, I don't have anything that's been vetted that I could share about what some of those changes could look like, but I can assure you something that is new to our department is that we're open to innovation and change. We're still in our young years in learning to embrace new perspectives, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing business. We did historically have a culture of, well, we've always done it that way, and we're trying to move away from that. Because we know if we can't adapt and change, we won't grow as an organization, and we're not going to be able to deliver a quality program to our stakeholders. So one thing that's key is having a NOFA, that funding available. We know that we are due to issue a new NOFA. Like I said, the last one we issued was about 18 months ago. And from that NOFA, we received 3 applications. Only one of them is viable. And we're recommending that project be approved for funding. But the assistance we're receiving from our contractor to not only provide that analysis and that study for us, but also to help us with outreach, to reach more people than we ever could as a state agency. That's key for us. And so if we do think we need to issue a new NOFA, we don't have a date certain, but we want to make sure we have the right outreach so we can have more than just 3 viable projects be submitted to us. We have funding available, we want to make sure we get it out. So while MPROP is the flagship program for HCD for mobile home park preservation, there is actually another program I just want to touch on briefly that also offers assistance to mobile home owners. And I do think it's actually relevant here for the purpose of today's conversation. So some of you may be familiar with our Cal Home program. If you were aware of it, you know it enables low and very low income households to become or remain homeowners. The program provides grants to local public agencies and nonprofit developers. And as it relates specifically to the conversation today in this context of mobile homes and manufactured housing, funds can actually be used for the rehabilitation, repair, replacement of individual homes that are not on a permanent foundation. You probably all know those types of homes not on a permanent foundation is what we typically find in a mobile home park. And that's the connection that I actually want to make as to why I'm going to share this information with you. So in thinking about the differences between MPROP and Cal Home, the main one is in how the program's administered. With MPROP, we here at HCD make those loans directly to the parks. Cal Home is a little bit different in that we at HCD make the loans to local jurisdictions who then in turn make those individual loans to the individuals who need it. So what that means is those end users, of individuals who might have a need for these funds, would need to approach or reach out to their local jurisdiction to inquire about those funds. The key reason why this information is so relevant actually today, right now, is because we're ready to release a new CalHome NOFA today, maybe tomorrow, certainly by the end of this week. Of the total funds being made available in that NOFA, we are actually setting aside $20 million solely for mobile homes and manufactured housing. Again, those uses are for the rehabilitation, repair, and replacement of mobile homes. What's really important for us is if those funds aren't utilized for those purposes, all of that money will actually roll back into the general CalHome program. So this is where our outreach and getting the word out is so important. We want to ensure that this information is spread out as widely as possible. So because this set aside exists exclusively for mobile homes, we have another 10, 15 million also available in a future NOFA for the same purpose, dedicated just for mobile homes, that we could expect sometime next year. So just with that little bit of information about CalHome, if you think you're interested and want to know more, and the same with MPROP, I would encourage you to visit the HCD website. There's an opportunity to sign up to receive electronic communications for that both of those programs. And in doing so, you'll be notified when we release the NOFA for CalHome, as well as other opportunities to learn more through webinars and Q&A sessions, and receive any other technical assistance as needed. Though we don't have an open NOFA for MPROP right now, there is the opportunity to actually look at the past NOFA, look at the Q&As that we've published, just to get a sense of what to expect with that program for when we do offer a NOFA. So with that, I think I'm going to pause here and just thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Deb. And I think we're holding questions to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Kim to join and talk to us a little about the co-op model and best practices in resident ownership.
All right, let me queue up my deck here. Just 1 minute. Well, sorry about that, having a little difficulty here. How's that? Can you see it? So I thought I would just, great. I thought I'd just start by talking a little bit about our nonprofit, the California Center for Cooperative Development. We've been in operation for about 14 years, serving cooperatives of all different types. So we work with worker co-ops, consumer, agriculture, childcare, and housing, providing development and technical assistance in governance and those kinds of things. So just like I loved your slides, Danielle, just to repeat what she did better than this is to say this is that manufactured home parks are a naturally occurring form of affordable housing. What I'd like you to do is kind of close your eyes a little bit and think about what pictures you have in your mind of when somebody says, I live in a mobile home park. And I think some of us might have pictures that are of trailer parks or trailer courts or so forth. And actually, we refer to them as manufactured homes now because they're really not very mobile. It often costs more to move if you wanted to try to move it than it is to just get rid of the manufactured home. So we refer to them for manufactured homes, and they really, really, I think, improved and are a stable form of affordability for many, many people. It's really their only entree into ownership. So just like Danielle said, there's about 5,300 parks, and that translates to about 364,000 homes and spaces. Most residents own their home and rent the lot that their home sits on. And also, as that great chart that she had showed, parks are closing and changing at an alarming rate due mostly to investors purchasing them. So I'd like to do, if Louisa, you can have a little video, it's really short. I'd like you to show that video now if you can. I guess I should probably unshare.
If you're like most people who own a home in a manufactured home community, you don't actually own the land underneath. This exposes you to potential rent increases year after year, with lot fees going towards someone else's profit. You might even lose your right to live there if your community gets sold for redevelopment, and you may have few or no viable options. And that's exactly why hundreds of communities are turning to a proven model of land ownership: resident-owned communities. That's where residents purchase their communities at fair market value, becoming the new owners through what's called a co-op or cooperative structure. They make decisions through their membership and an elected board of directors. Residents also set their own lot fees and put revenues back into community improvements. In fact, resident-owned communities are proven to increase lot fees at far lower rates than commercially owned communities. Learn more and take the first steps toward turning your neighborhood into a resident-owned community with Rock USA and its national network. Rock USA, making resident ownership a reality nationwide.
Thank you very much. So we are one of those network members. We're an independent nonprofit, as are there's a total of 15 independent nonprofits that are Rock technical assistance providers. And this is a system that Rock has developed to be able to help residents to quickly purchase their community so that they can compete with other investors. Now, quick isn't as quick as a cash investor for sure, but it is a really good system. Worked very effectively. Currently, there are about 270 resident-owned communities in 22 states that represent about 1,900 homes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these investors that we were referring to, and why this is such a hot market for investors. There was a John Oliver segment that it's available on YouTube now, and he talks about this issue. And there is a person named Frank Rolfe, who's a manufactured home investor. In fact, he's the sixth largest. He owns the sixth largest portfolio of manufactured home parks in the US. And he actually runs something called the Mobile Home University, where he teaches people how to invest in mobile home parks. And it actually has buses, non-COVID times, I imagine, doing tours. They go into manufactured home communities, encouraging people to do these investments. And this is the quote that he has that I think probably stands for the reason why this is a good investment. And he says, one of the big drivers to making money is the ability to increase the rent. If you didn't have them hostage, if they weren't stuck in those homes in the mobile home lots, it'd be a whole different picture. So basically, when a person defaults on their lot rent, they lose more than just, a few months of housing. They lose the home that they purchased or that they are purchasing. So that's a pretty hefty reason to stay current on your rent if you're able to. So I want to talk about a little bit about the model that is used by Rock, and I think it's a good model of cooperative. We have a lot of different forms of cooperatives, and this is called the Limited Equity Housing Cooperative. In this cooperative, the residents are owning the park, the land, property, and buildings. Those are all what are cooperatively owned. So members continue to own their individual manufactured home. The park is democratically governed by the members on the basis of each household gets one vote. More about how this limited equity housing co-op works. The residents, and this is part of the process of what we do, and we're helping manufactured home parks. The ROC model is to work with willing sellers. So when we get a call from a resident group that wants to purchase, our response is to let the owner know and encourage them to want to sell, but we don't get really active in trying to encourage them, because we don't want to discourage owners from wanting to sell to their residents. So once we have a willing seller, we work with residents and help them to be able to negotiate through this cooperative corporation to purchase and then operate the park. Each resident member purchases a share in the corporation, and that share is regulated by the state and by the bylaws of the cooperative. Then members you have to pay the mortgage, they have to pay the management company, they have to do everything everyone else needs to do. They pay a monthly site fee or lot rent to cover their portion of the mortgage and all of the operating expenses. The financing of the entire development, the purchase is made through a blanket mortgage that's on all the everything except for the individual homes. So the corporation owns the mortgage. So what are some funding sources? There technically, manufactured home parks qualify for Freddie and Fannie Mac, and I just actually ended a workshop about an hour ago from Prosperity Now, where Freddie and Fannie are saying that they will fund resident-owned manufactured home parks, except that I haven't heard very many of them, and they said they've only had 3. So there's some improvement to be done there. So one of the funders, the primary funders, is Rock USA. So they have a CDFI that's set up to specifically loan at a 110% loan to value to manufactured home parks. So this loan kicks in with a front up of money that is forgivable if it doesn't go through, to cover all of the due diligence that you have to do when you're purchasing a community. So an engineering report, title report, all those kinds of things are covered by the loan through Rock USA. MPROP is a great funding source and can work in conjunction with Rock USA. And in some cases, and in many cases, because these are low income communities, and in many cases, we're competing against investors, so the price is high for the community. We need extra help, and MPROP is a great source for that, particularly like we have one community we're working with right now that are farm workers. They're trying to purchase the community from the investor that already bought it. And, and it's not going to happen unless we have MPROP or some kind of other funding. MPROP is 3%. The payments can be forgivable, till the end. So there's a lot of really, really good things. So we really look forward to MPROP opening up again. One of the things about MPROP that I'm sure that they're working on is that it is pretty slow. The nice thing about Rock is that it's set up to try to be speedy. And in this market, you have to be able to have a funding source right away, because if you have a cash buyer, you're not going to wait for residents to get their funding. So then I think it's important to look at how the limited equity housing co-op preserves that affordability over time. And it's through the transactions that might take place after that initial purchase. So if a member wants to sell, they're selling both their share in the cooperative and their manufactured home. The limited equity housing cooperative is regulated by the state of California, and it has a set cap on equity accumulation. That keeps the share price low, so that over time, it will remain affordable. And that equity cap is 10% per year, but actually with Rock USA, their funding requires that it be zero interest. So the share price, whatever it is at the beginning, and the share prices in Rock USA have to be no more than $1,000. So they're between $100 and $1,000, and that price will remain consistent in perpetuity. The manufactured home, however, can be sold at market. So it's just the share price that is permanently restricted. And then another part of the regulation to keep it affordable in perpetuity is that the park cannot be sold or dissolved if at any kind of benefit to the members. So you don't want members to say, oh, we have an investor, they're going to pay us a lot of money, we want to sell our community. So they can't do that in the limited equity housing co-op. So it's sort of a pay it forward program, right? You get a good deal coming in and you pass that good deal on to future buyers. So some of the advantages, why do you want to do co-op ownership? Obviously in this investment market, you really want it, but there's some other reasons too, and that is that decision making. You can control your community. You have lots of decisions ongoing in owning a manufactured home park. You have fee increases, maintenance, services, rules, policies, park closure, all those kinds of things. And so what we represent this here is kind of a dichotomy between self-determination and vulnerability. So the co-op operates at cost. You don't have to worry about creating an investment profit to a third party if you own it already. You're operating at cost. Residents have a direct voice in the policies and the operations of that community. And there's really no risk of displacement from any kinds of outside things that could happen to the park. On the other hand, residents who rent their lot from a third party, they have regular rent increases because they have to fuel profit for forever the owner is. And that's just a fact. It's not necessarily a criticism, it's just a fact. Residents don't have any direct voice in policies, they have no ownership, and they do have risk of displacement if that park could be sold to someone else, there could be a change of use and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of give a graphic of how the governance takes place in the co-op. So members elect a board of directors. There are some decisions that have to be made by members. Members approve the annual budget. They, besides electing the board of directors, any bylaw change has to be approved by members. But the board of directors are making ongoing decisions and policies for the cooperative. In fact, they hire the management company. And management company usually then hires a site manager. The board of directors could also just directly hire a manager. And the management company reports to the board of directors. The management company is asked to provide and expected to provide monthly financial reports and so forth to the board so the board can govern effectively. I wanted to give a couple of examples of manufactured home parks, and one of them is a longstanding cooperative, La Cooperativa Santa Elena in the Salinas Valley. Some of you might have seen it if you're driving along the highway driving south. I think 101. This is a farm worker housing co-op that was built in the 1970s, and it was stimulated by work by Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers. Santa Elena was a rundown park, and there was a big political effort during that time because to make a decision, one of the options was to just tear it down or to repair it or to sell it, and the decision was to sell it to the residents at a pretty low price because it wasn't in very good shape. Today, the co-op is governed by the farm worker residents. They elect a board of directors, make all the decisions. It's been operating for a very, very long time. There are 100 homes and 12 recreational vehicles on site. They have a playground, they have a pool and a clubhouse, a laundry room. And the resident leadership makes all kinds of decisions. As you can see from this picture on the left, they recently installed a new playground, tried some turf to cut down on their water use. They directly hire a manager, and it's very well maintained. The park has an infrastructure that includes trucks and tools. They recently decided to redo the roads throughout the park. Sometimes they hire residents to do that work, to give opportunities to residents and also get a cheaper price for the co-op. They have a well-functioning board of directors, and they have decided to do some other things as a community. One of them is that they have a scholarship fund, and that scholarship fund offers assistance to residents, kids who are going to college. The other thing is that it's a cultural expectation of the farm workers that live here and many Latino communities to have a really big funeral when somebody dies. It's a really, really important part of that life cycle, and it can be quite expensive. So residents can voluntarily be a part of this fund so that they can help, it can be used to help pay for the expense of a funeral. So those are just some of the things that you can do when you own your own community. We're also currently working with a senior housing community in Northern California. It was previously owned by the deal's still going through, but we have a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't tell what that community is. But the residents were really faced with this decision. They have this really nice manufactured home park. They're retired, and all of a sudden the nonprofit that owns it says, hey, we're selling this park and we're going to sell it to investors. So we've been working with them, helping them out to try to purchase this park. They actually have quite a rent increase that is going to make this possible, but they're very determined to control their future, and then things look promising. So I just wanted to in summary, what are some of the advantages, some of the things that are good about resident-owned communities or cooperative ownership is that it secures the value of the manufactured home by eliminating vulnerabilities of space rental. Actually, homes in resident-owned communities actually end up being of higher value because of this security. People are willing to pay a little bit more. It protects the park from closure or being changed to another use. Again, that opportunity to operate at cost. You don't have to have extra money to pay someone else the profit. It stabilizes the monthly expenses over the long term. And residents are determining what is best for their community. And you saw you can decide on some other things. In fact, the senior housing community that we're working with, they're so concerned about their neighbors that some of them are putting money into a special fund to help that. And if MPROP opens up again, we'll be able to help them even more. Anyway, that's what I have to say about resident ownership.
Thanks so much, Kim. And I will pass it along to Alan to talk to us a little bit about mobile manufactured housing communities, rehabilitation and affordability in Butte County.
Thank you, Danielle. And I've been working for RCAC for almost 2 years now, and the first project that I was brought on to work on was campfire recovery in Butte County. And let me share my screen. And to give you a flavor of what it looks like. In Butte County, and especially in Paradise, this was the epitome of that naturally occurring affordable housing. People moved to the Paradise area, Butte County, because there were a lot of mobile home parks. You can see on this map, within Paradise and the surrounding area, mostly within Paradise, 31 of 38, there were 38 mobile home parks that were either partially or fully destroyed by the campfire in 2018. And as you can see from this map, most of them were directly in Paradise. And, that's because Paradise sits on a ridge above Chico and above Oroville, and it was forested and had beautiful views, and it was a fantastic environment for people to live in. But the fire, and either side of Paradise, there's two large canyons. The fires jumped the canyons and destroyed 90% of the town. And they lost, and you know, the mobile home parks were the largest portion of their affordable housing, and they lost 88%, almost 90% of the units in the fire, 1,660 out of 1,880. And yeah, it was very devastating. And the problem has been that, as I said earlier, the majority, I mean, all of the mobile home parks at the time of the fire were privately owned. There were none that were owned by nonprofits or public entities. Excuse me. FEMA has no assistance for private businesses, which that a mobile home park owned by a private owner and renting to residents is considered a private business. So FEMA doesn't have any assistance to help them rebuild. And the MPROP program does have a disaster recovery portion of the statute, but that portion was so narrowly written and so narrowly interpreted by the legal people in HCD that it's virtually useless in terms of trying to rebuild a park because first of all, it wouldn't work for any private owner. So it would have to be a nonprofit taking over the park or a resident ownership entity. And they would have to jump through a lot of hoops in terms of identifying who was there before and who's going to be there after in terms of meeting income qualifications and that kind of stuff, so that it really made it unusable for people in the Paradise area. We had a couple of nonprofits that were interested, but they couldn't overcome the hurdles. One of the other qualifications that MPROP requires is that a nonprofit show that they have previous experience with mobile home park management or operation or development, and there are not that many nonprofits that have that kind of experience. We do have nonprofits that have affordable housing experience and that can substitute, but in making that move to mobile home parks from regular multifamily, it's difficult. So there aren't that many funding sources that are available to assist when a nonprofit wants to get into the mobile home park business. This is just a list of the mobile home parks and the numbers of units that were destroyed, and you can see it's a lot. I just wanted to show you that for to give you an idea of the situation in Paradise. We've been working to try and come up with some solutions, and another big part of the problem is that the PG&E settlement or the PG&E lawsuit that caused the settlement, a lot of park owners that might have thought about selling are waiting to see if they're going to get any settlement money out of PG&E before they make that decision. So it's really slowed down the process up there. And that money, as you may have learned from reading in the papers, that money is coming out very slowly and cautiously. And it's going to come out in over a period of years, which isn't going to make a big difference for a lot of the situations up there. So we were hoping that some of the other programs that were coming down the pike, there's a program, Community Development Block Grant, Disaster Recovery. that is bringing a few $1 billion into the state to help with these recoveries in these wildfire areas. But again, the round peg of the mobile home park doesn't fit into the square hole that was created for that program. So there has to be changes in that program in order for it to be used for mobile home park rehabilitation. And there is under consideration right now between HUD and the state of California a waiver to grant the use of some of that CDBG-DR money to help rehab some of these parks that have been impacted by wildfires. It's just a very hard case to make, and there aren't that many sources of funding. Kim mentioned Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we've approached them, and they have restrictions that don't quite fit in some of these situations. They require permanent foundations under the mobile homes, which would be an additional cost to replacing the mobile home. And that's the other thing, that the MPROP funding for disaster recovery was only for rehab of the park itself, and there was no funding for replacing the destroyed units. So the residents would have to go to other sources like Cal Home or other places to try and replace their units that they lost. So it's just been trying to piece together different funding sources that could help with this recovery and with getting these previously naturally affordable housing sources back up and running. And it's just been an uphill battle all the way. The other problem that occurred is that the town of Paradise before the fire was strictly on wells and, well, not wells, but they were on septic systems for all of their housing. Everything was, even their businesses were on septic systems. They had water from the water irrigation district in main lines, but all of the mobile home parks and all the homes and businesses were serviced by septic systems. And that they had a lot of plastic piping in the ground for those systems. When the fire came through, it melted all that plastic and contaminated a lot of the soil. So that created another situation that had to be cleaned up and cleared out and made it more costly for the recovery. So it's just been a lot of factors that have made this a very slow recovery. And we're still working with the town, looking for ways to find funding for them to rebuild and get people back into the town. One of the things that they're doing is they're investigating the possibility of putting in a sewer system, at least for a portion of the town, which would get a bunch of people off of the septic systems and allow them to have more multifamily units built within the town, which will help on the affordability side. But that is going to be a long process as well. And they're also looking at a lot of mitigation measures to protect the town against future wildfires. And that's another area that we're working with them to come up with some ideas to help. And the insurance companies have raised their rates or pulled out of the area. They're pulling out of a lot of wildfire areas in California right now, or raising their rates so much that people can't afford homeowner insurance. So that's another issue that we're working on to try and help. If we can get enough mitigation that it impacts how the insurance companies look at these wildland urban interface areas where the wildfires are prevalent, if we can get enough mitigation that satisfies them to bring down the price or to stay in the state, then we'll have accomplished a big, getting over a big stumbling block right there. It's really been difficult. That's about all I have right now. I know there's some questions, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Alan. So I'm going to start from the top. I think this is for you, Deb. Does the CERNA program also allow resident purchases for mobile home parks?
Yes, it does. So I did post a response in there. I don't know if everyone can see it, but the Joe Cerna Jr. Farm Worker Housing Grant Program does offer an option as an eligible activity for the acquisition of manufactured housing that's not installed again on a permanent foundation. And it's part of a program to address and remedy the impacts of current and potential displacement of farm worker families from existing labor camps, mobile home parks, or other housing. There's a lot of criteria involved with this program. And so I think some of the best detailed information can, again, be found on our website. We did just issue a NOFA for this program a few months ago. It's now closed. So we probably will not have another NOFA until next year, maybe early next year. So if people are interested, I would encourage them to look for additional information on our website about that, detailed information.
Thank you. And another question, and Deb, I'm sorry if you already answered this in the HOVA app, but whether MPROP provides assistance for residents displaced from wildfires?
Again, so that was a great question. So as Alan mentioned, MPROP does provide assistance to fund loans for the construction or reconstruction of a mobile home park to replace one that's been destroyed by a natural disaster. It is a challenge to utilize that particular aspect of the MPROP program. And then Alan did also reference CalHome, which does have a disaster component that allows for owner-occupied rehabilitation assistance for manufactured housing, which includes the replacement of a home, whether it's located in a mobile home park or elsewhere. We actually, I want to say back on August 6th, we just released a NOFA for that specific disaster recovery program. It's part of CalHome. It's the CalHome Disaster Recovery. So it's separate from the CalHome General NOFA that should be released today or tomorrow. But again, more information is available on our website, and that disaster recovery component is actually embedded in the general CalHome page.
Thank you, Deb. We have a question around Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, first right of refusal. Do the panelists think it would be helpful to establish if this sort of program or policy would be more helpful to establish more co-op parks? If so, on what jurisdictional level would it need to be adopted, state, local, or otherwise?
I can respond to that. Yes, I think it would be extremely helpful. It's been really important in other states where there are a lot of states that have TOPA regulations. It's usually at the state level. There are actually some local jurisdictions that have it, but if we could have something at the state level, it'd be really helpful. The reason that it's helpful is because it's really difficult when residents, you just learn it's going to be sold and there's no opportunity for them to explore alternatives. So that we do have a law right now that says that residents and manufactured home parks they can write a letter to the owner and tell them that they want to be told if that happens. And they have to renew that letter every year, but there's really no teeth in it.
Thanks, Kim. And one other question is, this participant has heard a lot about how manufactured homes are required to have permanent foundations and how this can serve as a barrier to funding and or building manufactured homes. Where do these requirements come from? And is there any movement to change them?
Danielle, I can answer that. The requirement for permanent foundations is not, it's if you want to get a regular mortgage from a bank for your home, it has to be on a permanent foundation. Otherwise, it's considered, mobile. And a lot of, that's a rule from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and some of the other mortgage backers at the federal level. So when you're talking about federal programs, sometimes that requirement comes into play. Or if you were going or if you wanted to have your home classified as real estate rather than mobile, then it would have to be on a permanent foundation. And that changes the whole category of taxes and everything else for the home.
Great. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Okay. That might be all of the questions from attendees. And yeah, I don't know if any of the other panelists have any final thoughts or have any questions they want to pose to the audience. Otherwise, we can wrap up early. All right, Bob, I saw you come on.
Well, yeah, I was waiting for I was trying to do the timing. Yeah, thank you. I mean, this was a challenging discussion, but there's also some, resources raised. So I want to thank Danielle, Kim, Alan, and Deb for increasing my knowledge about manufactured housing, some of the tools. And I was glad, Kim, that you're part of the Rock USA. I dealt with Rock USA back on the East Coast a number of years ago. And so it's really important to have those type of resources and technical support coming into us. So again, I want to thank the panel. This is our last workshop. Manufactured housing is a critical element of, and I was really sobered by the number of parks in Paradise and sort of how important it was for housing and how challenging it's going to be to rebuild some of those parks. So that's part of what we're doing with this. And sadly, it's become climate change is here, and so we got to constantly battle that. So again, thank you for the thoughtfulness, for challenging us, and for us to think about some new opportunities. And this closes day one of our 3-day summit, and we covered a lot. We've had like four terrific sessions, and tomorrow we have 4 more. We have new and emerging funding sources, how to get more funding. We have a leadership session, the home guarantee program, and home key. So we've got similar 4 workshops and more panelists. And again, thank you all for participating, and thank our panel, and enjoy the rest of your day. Andrea, do you have any sort of housekeeping announcements or anything we need to do?
Just make sure all attendees continue to use your Whova app. Feel free to post comments on the community board. Panelists will also be posting resources from each of their sessions, so feel free to check that out. Other than that, enjoy your evenings, and we will see you tomorrow at 9:30 for our first session.
Great, thanks again.